There's a general understanding or misunderstanding, if you will, that Islam is the religion of war. That Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Prophet of Islam, was a man of war, and this seems to be constantly propagated. And it amazes me how much of a propagation it is taking in different circles. And the interesting thing is that when we look at the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, many people, they have studied it merely from the perspective of the military action. Some of the scholars, they have studied it and made this knowledge available readily from other aspects of the Prophet's, peace be upon him, life. But there is this constant understanding that the prophethood and messengerhood was just a battleground between the Muslims and everybody else. And it is important to contextualize this. Now, how many battles did the Prophet, peace be upon him, send or command or manage or start or respond to? When we look at how the scholars define a battle, they have two definitions. The first definition is what's called a ghazwa, and the second definition is called a sariya. A ghazwa is a battle, a full-fledged battle in which a full army is present, is prepared, and is marched to a battleground of some sort, or an army is prepared to defend a city like Medina, for example. A Sariya is a bit of a smaller platoon that gets sent out to perform a specific objective. That objective could be, a small one to deter. Could be a big one. Some of the scholars, they said that those smaller sariyas, those smaller platoons, they can be from 5 people up to 300 or 400 people. So when we look at that definition, now we can start categorizing. Well, how many battles did the Prophet, peace be upon him, go through? Now, it's also important to note that the way the scholars count the number of battles is also different. So, for example, if there are two different conflicts that happened as part of the bigger response, the bigger military response, is that considered two battles or is that considered one battle? And when the scholars took those differences into consideration, they said the Prophet, peace be upon him, went through and they counted from 19 up to maybe 27 or 29 different big battles, ghazwat. And the way, again, they counted it is that depending on whether they should be combining two conflicts that happen or two face-to-face meetings with the enemies as one or as two separate ones. So these are considered kind of the big battles. If we want to be conservative, we can say it is about maybe 19 ghazwa, 19 main battles. When they looked at the Sariya, they also looked at it from different criteria. And some said it is, you can count many of them, could be 60, even up to 100 different smaller kind of platoons that get sent to different places to achieve certain objectives. But on conservative estimate, it's about 40. So if we take those conservative estimates from both sides, from the Ghazwa, the big battle, as well as from the Sariya, kind of the small mission-specific platoon that gets sent out, we're around 60 or so different conflicts, if you will, military conflicts, if you will. Now, that does sound like a lot. It's important to note that majority of those meetings that have happened, or those conflicts, they not necessarily resulted in any death, nor they resulted in a battle at that moment. It could have been a deterrence. When the scholars came to count how many people died from both sides during all of these battles, and whether the small or the big ones, some of the scholars, they reached the number of about 1,400 to 1,500 people that died from both sides during the whole life of the messengerhood or prophethood, which is quite unique. When we look at messengerhood and prophethood, that spanned 23 years. So 23 years of, uh, you know, new revelation and a new systemization of society, but only about 1,400 or 1,500 people that were killed from both sides. It's also worth noting that saying this number does not merely just reflect that the number of deaths were something that was not necessarily the aim. It was not the aim of any battles, and it was not the aim of the Prophet, peace be upon him, objective behind war. His objective was not to go and kill people and demolish cities and burn houses and starve people. As a matter of fact, all these all of the war jurisprudence is detailed out in the books of the scholars and through the prophetic tradition, the hadith. And hence that gives us a different perspective on what it means to have a battle. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he always said that, do not wish to meet the enemy, but if you meet the enemy, don't run away. Now, what this also tells us that war is not an objective. War could be a means as a last resort to something that many other aspects were tried for, and that was the final mean to achieve it. And even if the Prophet went to war and had a battle, um, there were many rules, including not harming children, not harming women, not harming elderly people, not harming people who are not fighting, not burning houses, not destroying trees. All these aspects that currently in our today's world are not being practiced. Now, this is not to say that back in the day that people did not have big wars. No, people had some massive, massive wars. Other civilizations, they had massive, massive wars. The Romans and the Persians, as well as even within the Arabian Peninsula, many of the tribes that were involved in war in pre-Islamic history, some of these wars they lasted over 40 years over honor and over camels and over mistakes and whatnot. Sometimes even over some scandal that could be propagated through a piece of poetry. But when the Prophet, peace be upon him, came, that was not the objective. The objective was not to have war for the sake of war. And also, the idea of growing out of war is built in within the Islamic tradition. The Islamic tradition is not there to instill the idea of war in the world. It is meant to grow out of that concept. So this was something that is worth noting, and it's something that is definitely worth keeping in mind, especially for people that I'm seeing right now online that are constantly just, just saying things without backing them up. Now, I do understand that many people do not have that background. Maybe they're not willing to go and research it. But it's also good to know that if you don't know, then don't say. I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next episode.